It's a good spot, I think. It's my favorite. I'm going to have Jonas staring at me, I think, so I need to get mentally prepared.
I mean, you don't have
sitting here judging.
As much of a picture show, but I added a picture that I think you might be able to talk over. So.
I didn't have the chance to pick pictures because
I think that is all right.
Sorry.
We have a wonderful one anyway.
I know which. I know which one.
Yeah, it's semi-relevant.
It is. Well, then let me start reading my thing here. All right. Telemondus had succeeded in everything he had set out to do. He had survived death, had regained his own body, had done every impossible task that his father had asked of him, and yet it really felt like he had failed. Instead of gaining control over Telengard and his home, the Cabraya, he had instead destroyed it on accident, really. He had taken his father's lands and broken them. Chiron would not be pleased about that, he was sure. But he had promised great things, should Telemondus succeed in killing Anfaria. And that he had. The entirety of Telengard had seen it, and undoubtedly Chiron already knew. Besides, what is one little island in the grand scheme of things? And there was still the matter of Geraphon, who had turned out to be a valuable asset in the end. A relationship born from a number of unfortunate decisions on his part had eventually led to him being the king of the Cabraya, ruling over the native Irenaeans and ultimately leading to Telemondus and Cairen's return to dragonhood. Of course, none of this was anything that Telemondus couldn't have achieved himself, but the delegation had made it easier to concentrate on other, more important things. And now Geraphon was stuck in hell, his kingdom destroyed through no fault of his own. Geraphon didn't deserve much of a reward for his actions, but he certainly didn't deserve a one-way trip to hell either. And so, Telemondus eventually left Catapesh, where he had stayed with Cash for a little while after Telengard's destructions. Not to meet with his father quite yet, but to go get Geraphon out of hell. Perhaps because his brother didn't deserve it, perhaps simply because it was a convenient reason to delay the meeting with his father. He wasn't quite sure himself. The trip would be simple in theory. Armed with enough appropriate magic, as well as having a relatively favorable relationship with hell itself, the biggest danger was probably the contract that Telemondus was still bound by. Should a high enough ranking devil command him to do something, he didn't quite know if he could resist it. So the obvious solution was to simply be unavailable to any requests by staying undetected. Geraphon was easy enough to find. He had done the smart thing of fleeing back to the blackened remains of the Cabraya and surrounding himself with whatever remained of his people, the Irenaeans. Eventually they would undoubtedly be overwhelmed. And while Geraphon was capable, he too would eventually fall. Unless someone were to save him, of course. Geraphon's gratitude was secondary, really, to his once again renewed respect and fear of what Telemondus was capable of. Even without Chigamon's looming threat over him still, he would perhaps prove useful in the future, the perfect mix of loyalty and fear of failure. But eventually then it was time. He traveled to the trio of obsidian black spires in between the churning waters of an ocean still settling after the disappearance of an entire island. His father's lair had been mostly unaffected by the cataclysm, but the throne was now without a kingdom. In and down he went, through the winding tunnels, ceilings dripping boiling acid that was uncomfortable even for him. He didn't know where to go, but if his father truly wanted to speak with him, they would meet. Deeper and deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels, diving through acid that left only bedrock untouched, following only his instincts. And then, there he was, his enormous form emerging from a murky pool, with impossible silence for a creature of his bulk. When Telemondus tried to leave again, he got lost in the tunnels multiple times. He was too shaken to concentrate, feeling like a churning whirlpool of conflicting emotions. The scratching sounds of his own claws on bare rocks startled him more than once. The rainbow light of glowing crystal spikes made him want to turn around and run. And yet, he had never been as excited. Not when he felt Eramanthis's neck snap in his jaws, not when he ripped Anfaria's pathetic armor to shreds and sunk his claws into her underbelly. Nothing could compare to what his father had planned for him. Jargamen had been pleased, utterly pleased. And then he had revealed his entire plan, the plans that he had been pursuing for centuries. Tiamat was returning, escaping her prison to rule once more, and the queen needed a king. Although calling Tiamat a queen was like calling Jargamen a peasant. There was no appropriate word, no appropriate title, except her name itself. Every dragon had some innate knowledge that included Tiamat, the mother of all dragons. They knew enough never to mention her name, never to even risk drawing her attention. But 5 creatures had indeed drawn her attention. 5 chromatic dragons, the most powerful of each kind, had been tasked with creating an heir worthy of her. A task that each of them had devoted their entire lives to. It was rare that a chromatic dragon would put so much effort into something they would not benefit from themselves. Yet disobeying the goddess was unimaginable. Jargamen had simply created as large of a brood as he was able to, counting on one of them to eventually distinguish themselves. And in the end, they were free. Nidhogger the Linnorn. He had grown old, large, and powerful. He had shown much potential until his greed for more power turned into madness. Geraphon, young but physical strength far beyond his age. His sheer bulk would have eventually combined with wisdom and magical potential that comes with age. But he had made one too many mistakes, getting captured, surviving, and thriving only because of Telemondus' actions. And then, of course, there was Telemondus. He had shown potential not through power, but cunning. He played his enemies against each other, losing fights, but winning wars. And in the end, he had survived even death. He had killed his own killer, thrown himself into battle against unwinnable odds time after time, and eventually killed Inferior. He had not done it alone, but that did not matter. He had succeeded where others failed, through perseverance, cunning, and the willingness to do whatever it takes, including not letting pride take away your victory. His task now was simple: survive, thrive, and kill the contestants of the other 4 chromatic dragons. And he had his father's support. It was a staggering thought that he could simply take from his father's infinite wealth, that his father was willing to fulfill his requests, should he have any. He even offered mates, both to get rid of that pesky contract with Hell and to build his own brood. But finding a mate was a task that Telemondus was more than happy to undertake on his own. Besides, he was very much aware that his father's support was as much a trap as it was meant to help. One wrong request, one wrong action could change him from Jargamen's heir to yet another set of bones to join his other failed sons. But that last thought was shoved away as Telemondus headed north to find a lady dragon. Cairen, on the other hand, had nobody to impress but himself. He had watched Telengard's destruction from afar, from the safety of Zacharias' own plane. It was an uncomfortable place, his presence attracting the ethereal forces that would turn any living thing into dust in mere seconds. But he was in a safe place, or so he had been assured. It was definitely safer than what his ex-counterpart Telemondus had been through. He had stayed to finish the ritual, motivated by some uncharacteristic gratitude. It was true that without Hell's intervention, Telemondus would have been dead 3 times over, but trying to show an emotion that Telemondus was physically unable to have in the first place had almost gotten him killed, again. Cairen didn't quite get it. Not that it mattered. He had gotten what he wanted. Despite still being unsure why it had worked, he had fulfilled his only desire. As the shaman had said, the magic they employed did not have the power to cause drastic changes, at least not in a controlled fashion. They were unwilling to further delve into the mystery and had simply decided that their god had wanted it so. God being Geraphon. Thinking that Geraphon wanted to fill Cairen's dreams made him chuckle. Well, it ended up being more of a chortle, really. Cairen decided that he'd have to practice growling instead, since chortling was hardly appropriate. Eventually, he left Zacharias' plane, without plans but not without purpose. He had fought titans, literal and metaphorical. But that was simply not enough. Many nights he had spent reading children's stories of dragons capturing princesses that then get saved by some knight in shining armor, of valiant defenders of civilization, killing a dragon in his sleep and pronouncing that they saved the world. Even history books seem to often skip past the glorious rampages, the thriving tyrannies, and other draconic success stories, instead going straight to the part where they ended. He would change that. He would force history to acknowledge him. He would bathe the world in flame so that history only had two choices: skip 1,000 years completely or acknowledge his success. But when he left, he quickly noticed that he was not where he had wanted to be. He meant to go to Golarion, somewhere in the east, to enjoy himself for a while, then travel west, leaving a scar in the lands that would be named after him. Instead, he was just outside Turbanon, in Telengard, the city where he had grown up as a human child, the one he had destroyed on the night he left. The road he was on was leading north, towards the city where he had been captured, then carted off to Brandaskar. And next to him on the road was the old man, his mentor back then, smiling the same cold smile, wearing the same black and red robe. The illusion faded and was replaced by endless tundra. And next to him, where the old man in the illusion had stood, was the biggest creature Cairen had ever seen. A red dragon the size of a mountain. So big that Cairen's senses refused to believe its existence, searching for the telltale signs of yet another illusion, but finding none. A dragon so big, and Faria and Chargaman would have to be piled on top of each other to even come close. That last thought, coupled with the crushing sensation of impending doom, made Cairen chuckle again, ending in another indignified chortle. The mountain growled in response, the sound of a mildly confused earthquake. The feeling of dread faded, replaced by confusion, then understanding. There was no doubt. This was Cairen's father. They walked and they talked throughout the night. He too had received the same task from Tiamat herself. He too had looked for those in his brood who would distinguish themselves, and some did, but they all had been slain, one after the other by some unknown and unseen enemy, until the enemy had come for the sire himself. Jargaman had come in the night, a reckless, direct assault that would have almost worked too. But after the first strike, he was no match for the great worm Red Dragon, and retreated. Still, he had succeeded in killing the entire brood, leaving only the half-breeds, the pathetic excuses, and weaklings alive, and Cairen's father heavily wounded. And so he had sworn revenge. And just as Chargaman had employed his foe's tactics, so would he. Instead of insulting Chargaman directly, he would employ cunning. Instead of wounding him, he would leave him crippled. He had forced the strongest of his next clutch into human form. Hiding his true form deep down, he had studied Chargaman's brood, had taken on a human disguise, given Erementhus the location of Chargaman's favorite, and compelled to kill him. He had nudged Hell's attention to the dying black dragon, and even offered a vessel for him when his victim sought for help. And so the black dragon's favorite had ended up a slave to his own. The plan had worked, but without Cairen being aware of his heritage, it accomplished nothing. The plan had not really worked out. Disrupted by unexpected successes and Hell's own plans, it had been overly convoluted, destined to fail. Telemondus was alive and well, stronger than ever. On the other hand, so was Cairen. Amidst the carnage left behind by Chargaman, he had become the strongest. And on top of that, Cairen knew what Telemondus would try to do next. Despite their separation, when you have known another being's thoughts for years and years, you understand it utterly. Cairen knew about Telemondus' contract, the requirement for its completion, and he had listened at length to his plans on how to accomplish it back when they were still stuck together. He would simply destroy Chargaman's favorite now, followed by Jeraphon, and he'd have as good as won. And so Cairen too headed north, not to find a lady dragon, but instead to find Telemondus. The end.
Well, well, well.
Shocking revelations.
That's so mean.
Shocking.
You wanted to hear more?
No, it's just mean that they've been together for so long and just, gonna go and kill him.
Can I hear chapter 2?
That's the DLC. That will be
We're,
$50, please.
We're launching a Kickstarter.
The final end.
Yes. By the ending. For
This isn't Mass Effect, we don't need a new ending.
Next session, we'll finally kill the king.
Yeah. So
yeah, nice. So I have a question. Because Cairen's background was always the most mysterious. Was this always his fate? Basically, did you have this plan from the start, or was this something that more grew out of the character?
Ruining the immersion right away. This was not planned from the start.
not by sheep, at least.
Man, look, I had it all.
Ominous. Yes.
but it's I
Well,
think,
we did talk about at one point to have a mythic campaign,
right.
and as such, I did make mythic plots for each of the characters.
Mm.
But I mean, even
this-
so, it's a good example of, if nothing else, emergent storytelling. You know, as the plot develops, you also get to learn more of your own character, and you sort of develop it further and make it even more interesting. And I think that's a good example.
But why kill Telemondus? I don't get it.
Because Telemondus is basically one of the 5 heirs of the big chromatic dragons that is competing for Tiamat's favor, basically. So all Chiron has to do to win, like, the power of a god, basically, is to just kill the other 4, and Telemondus is one of them. With Gervon kind of being his, like, utterly useless replacement.
Oh god, so this is all just to win favor with Tiamat?
Yeah,
Okay.
Tiamat is a god.
Yeah, sure.
And the chance to basically get it on with Tiamat means that Chiron would basically be the source for the next generation of dragons.
Mm.
Sounds like you've got a lot of business ahead of you.
Whoever wins that fight anyways.
Mm.
The nauseating breath, probably him.
Oh yeah, the nauseating.
It's not often you hear a player character say, "Get it on with Tiamat," and actually mean it. You know, it's.
I mean, we're all doing things that like, wait, what, you did that? Which I guess, then, leaves us with a very intriguing character. The Lich.
Heck, I was right.
Thanks for that intro, I guess.
Also, blur.
Blue!
There are no more immediate questions. I suppose we can go on to the last, the one at the end.
All right, let's take a look at the chat. No immediate
You just want
questions.
everything revealed, or?
Yeah, you can reveal everything. That's perfectly fine.
Sure.